My name's Paul Stapleton. I run a number of different businesses, property, entrepreneurship businesses, got a clothing brand, training academy, lots of different things at the moment, yeah.
So what do you typically look for with an assisted sale property-wise then, where you feel like, okay, I could add a little bit of sauce to this and increase the value? What do you tend to look for?
So for me, one deal brings me in, well for me, the way I source, one deal brings me in 10 grand. One deal pays for my whole year basically.
Is that your fees? 10?
Minimum 10.
How comes?
Because I'm just the best.
What's your thoughts on buy-to-let 2025? Is it done? Is it still beneficial?
It's not done, and it's never going to be done. I think it's going to take a lot for people to be completely out of buy-to-let, but Liverpool and Manchester,
yeah.
Oh my God, there's stories out there of how much have lost through them taking 50% deposits off plan to fund a development, and then all of a sudden the development goes wrong. Over the last 4 years, I've got over 30,000 followers on there, which is pretty big. But I've studied it because you've got 500 followers on Instagram, only 500 people typically see your post. But that's solidly posting for 4 years until he got his first viral video like last week. Like, it's crazy.
With that, you do the training for property sourcing,
Yeah.
and you do sales training. Is that the same title?
So I've had a sales training business for like 12 years. I was employed to go into a property company. The more I learned about what they were doing, the more I was like, this is what I want to be doing.
Just for the listeners, the viewers, can you just tell us a little bit about what you do?
Yeah, so my name's Paul Stapleton. I run a number of different businesses, property, entrepreneurship businesses, got a clothing brand, training academy. So lots of different things at the moment, yeah.
Brilliant. Quite a few different things to jump into then. So property, like what is your favourite property strategy at the moment?
So I like using a strategy called assisted sales. Don't know if you've heard of that one before. So if you think about like flipping property, there's loads of purchasing costs that you don't get back, or you've got to factor that into your deal. So you're buying 100 grand property, it's maybe going to be 10 grand's worth of fees that you're not going to get back, solicitors costs. You've got the mortgage broker cost, bridging, interest, stamp duty, maybe a sourcing fee. Assisted sales is basically flipping a property that somebody else owns. So let's say the house would be worth 100 grand in a finished state, but it's worth 80 grand in the current state. Maybe it needs 10 grand spending on it. You spend 10 grand, you double your profit, you sell it out at 100.
Well, so there's people actually living in the properties already, like people that are looking to sell their house.
It could be,
Yeah.
or it could be a vacant property. It could be a tenanted property. We've done a few that are tenanted, and we've just put them up in a hotel for like a couple of days whilst we carry out the works. But I look for the ones that need minimal works, maximum profit, rather than taking on a lot of risk, going back to brick, kitchens, bathrooms, that kind of thing.
So do you split the profit then with the current owner?
So when I went on a course to learn this, that's how they say it. So they look at the upside for both people.
Yeah, that's
so
what you'd think,
if you
yeah.
let me do this, I'll split the uplift with you. But being a salesman, right, I'm just like, well, why would I want to split it with you? Because if you had the money, you would pay, you would get it done yourself. You don't have the money, you can't sell your property. It's been on the market for 3 months. So I'm taking all the risk. So I'll get all the uplift. So it's never, ever, ever for me been a suggestion to a seller that we'll ever split the profit. But everyone that I know splits the profit.
So do you give them anything, or is it case by case?
What's the appeal for them then to get an assisted sale?
So it's in the name, right? You're assisting them to sell their property. It's only going to work for someone that's explored all of the market and they've not got any success. So I'm looking at deals that have been on for a minimum of 3 months. So they've probably had a price reduction. They've probably had a couple of deals fall through. For me, they're like the ideal ones. And then we'll go in and say, right, this is why we think it hasn't sold. We think it's because of X, Y, and Z. We're happy to bring it up to a saleable standard. So we'll assist you in selling your property. But in return, we'll agree a price today in its condition today, but we'll take the uplift because we're taking all the risk.
So yeah, effectively you'll buy it at the price they probably want for it anyway.
Yeah.
And then you haven't got to pay all the fees.
Yeah,
to
like if
purchase
it's
it.
already been reduced and the deal still works with the uplift when you do the works, then you can still give them what they want. But this particular strategy is it's creative.
That's
so
smart, yeah.
Yeah, I like it.
Sometimes
I haven't heard
you
of it
might have to pay their mortgage payments if it's interest only. Maybe you might have to cover rent if you need it kept empty. Like I said before, we put some tenants up because we had to carry out some work. We had to change the boiler and some pipe work, so we had to move them out.
Have you ever had any experience with that particular model where perhaps you've approached someone, they just want to sell at a certain rate, you take it over, you make that house beautiful, you make a nice bit of wedge off of it? Have you ever had one of your clients who you're doing the assisted sale for turn around and be like, actually, well, we want a bigger piece now? Has that ever happened?
Yeah, I mean, like, they can ask, but the contract's already tied in. So the contract's already there to say that they've agreed to this price. And that's the price they've agreed to net, and anything above that becomes ours. So, yeah, sometimes you will, because sometimes you end up getting more than you anticipated. So we may tell them we're going to make £10,000-20,000 uplift, but maybe a different agent comes in and says, well, actually, I think we can get you another 5 or 10 grand. We've had some deals that have been even better, that we've done the assisted sale, but not only have we suggested what needs to be done, we've actually got the owners to pay for the works that need to be done, and then we've taken all the upside.
Is that with like a little bit of a NLP maybe?
No, not that good. He was getting divorced, and he didn't want the wife to get any money, so
He spent all the money.
he basically spent the money and sold at the price that the mortgage was at. So he sold it to us at the mortgage price, paid for all the works that needed to be done, and then he was happy for us to take the uplift.
Got ya. So what do you typically look for with an assisted sale property-wise then, where you feel like, okay, I could add a little bit of sauce to this and increase the value? What do you tend to look for?
So for me, I'm not necessarily looking to add value. I'm looking for something that's been discounted, that's in a good enough condition that something just needs to be put right. So maybe visually the walls are leery colours, maybe the carpets are filthy, just a clean of the carpets, a boiler change, maybe because the EPC rating's high. In some instances, maybe it just needs an all-round bit of TLC on it. So I'm looking at the lower kind of end properties that don't need a lot of work. What I found is that people that are doing it on a larger scale, so they're doing the £250,000-300,000 houses, they're doing back to brick, they're doing new electrics and stuff like that, and they're spending another 100 grand, they're then only making 50 grand, 60 grand profit. Like, when you're spending big money, it's harder to double your profit. But when you're doing the lower end ones, so I might do them where I put 5 grand in, it's quite easy to make 300-400% return on investment, like make 15-20 grand on that, just because it's been discounted and you've increased the value by, let's say, changing the kitchen doors rather than changing the whole of the kitchen. So just giving it a spruce up.
Is it really sometimes that simple as well? Just sometimes it's like a lick of paint maybe to get it sold?
Yeah, so that was my very first one. My very first one had every colour of the rainbow on the wall. The hallway was dark terracotta. All the woodwork was brown. Like, it was just really dark and dingy, but it was a massive double-fronted semi-detached house, like big house. And we just spent 5 days with 50 litres of white emulsion, fixed the fence. I went up there and just carpeted the patio and the driveway, like just made it look more presentable, new shower screen. Like, I think we spent no more than like 3.5-4 grand on it. And there was like 16, 17, about 16.5 grand uplift on it. So I like the simple ones. I'm not really a massive risk taker when it comes to it.
Whereabouts are these properties located? You're saying about 100
Yeah.
grand, obviously not around there.
Yeah. So my very first one was in Lincolnshire, and I've done some up in Cumbria. I've done them in the northwest, the northeast. So property-wise, I don't do anything within like a 200-mile radius of where I live in Bromley, because it just doesn't financially stack for my end user.
Yeah, no,
But then you
that makes
look
complete
anywhere
sense.
else in the UK then,
Yeah.
so there doesn't, you're not...
Yeah, so I've got
Prejudice
little
would go
pockets.
anywhere.
So as long as there's a story that I can build on, so as long as there's like some regeneration plans, or there's just, I can see that there's a strong demand in that area. So if I go on and look at 3-bed semis in that area, and there's like 2 or 3 available, but there's like 20 that are sold subject to contract, that would show me there's a strong demand for 3-bed semis in that area. So I would focus on finding more of that stock, and I would then aim it as an end user of a homeowner occupier, because they're always willing to pay a bit more for a better finish. whereas an investor is looking to get at the lowest possible price to maximise their yield. So there's going to be certain stock where I'll de-risk it by saying, right, I'm going to go down the route of this being good for an investor. And then there'll be certain stock that I'll go, you know what, this is a homeowner-occupier market. We're going to do a better spec because they might pay a little bit more. So where I live in Bromley, the 3-bed semi comes on the market, like it's gone in the first week, and it's gone like 15-20% above the market value because it's just people want to move there for 15-minute journey into London. They want to move there for the schools. So if you've got an area that's high demand, then you just have to work out who your end user is going to be.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So 2025, tax laws have changed a lot. A lot of landlords have actually ended up selling their properties because they're just like, the tax is too crazy. What's your thoughts on buy-to-let in 2025? Is it done? Is it still beneficial? Quick pause from the podcast to give a special shout out to one of our sponsors, the Rejuvenation Doctors. The Rejuvenation Doctors is a hair transplant clinic in the northwest of England in Bury, owned by Dr. Jamie. Now, I can personally vouch for these guys as I myself around 2 months ago had a hair transplant from Dr. Jamie, and I can't wait to see the growth in the next 3 to 6 months. The service was amazing. It was very VIP. He looked after me throughout, and he made a very uncomfortable experience extremely comfortable and caring. Now, boys, if your hairline's going back, if you're receding, if you've got that McDonald's hairline, do not wait until it's too late. Message Dr. Jamie today at the Rejuvenation Doctors. His tags are in the link to the description of this podcast, and he will sort out your hairline just the same as he's sorting out mine.
It's not done, and it's never going to be done. I think it's going to take a lot for people to be completely out of buy-to-let. It's more difficult. So if I go back 2-3 years ago, my investors were looking for 6% yield. Now they're looking for 8%. So it's an adjustment. I mean, that's a big jump, right? That's like a 30% jump. But at the same time, you've got people that are defaulting on their mortgages, so they need to sell. They bought at a good price a few years ago, so there's room for negotiation on price. You've just got to look at areas that are designed to still get that yield to combat like the higher interest rates. But there's like new generations of investors coming through now as well. So the older generation investors that have been used to earning big returns and only having 1% interest rates are getting a bit fed up. And the new generation see it as the norm. So all of a sudden they're like, well, yeah, we're still happy to buy, we'll add value, and we'll make money back in equity.
That makes a lot of sense for sure. So in terms of buying your own home to live in, controversial. Some people think you should buy your own home to live in. Others, such as Simon Squibb, they think it's a complete scam.
Team rent, team buy.
Team rent, team buy, right? I've recently just had an offer accepted. It's going through the legals now for a 2-bed apartment around the corner.
Yeah. He changed his mind every week, by the way. Like,
Well,
what was he done to you? He told you a great idea about how he's going to rent a property and blah, 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 blah.
Buy £1 million house in 2 years.
That's it.
Yeah. And, that will still happen.
And then he left the office and Luke goes, where are you going? He goes, I'm just going to look at a property to buy.
No, the thing is, I am a walking contradiction. Like, I change my mind all the time, and I'm fine with that. I'm used to myself by now, but let me not digress. Offer accepted. I'm buying this place. It's 400k for a 2-bed apartment. Now, I looked at the interest first every time I bought a property, and well, according to the mortgage, I'm going to pay nearly 4 times the amount of the property price just to eventually say I own a property.
So over 25 years?
I actually extended it slightly to 40 years.
Yeah.
Slightly, 25 to 40.
The reason why...
Just double.
15 years.
Just double, yeah.
Well, based off these guys' advice, right, I'm not planning to live there for the rest of my life. It's a beautiful apartment, but I'll probably stay there for 2 years, make a bit of dough off the interest. But then I'm like weighing up the pros and cons, right? I'm like, this is a scam in a way in terms of the interest, but it's the game we're in and you kind of have to play it.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on buying a home to live in? Is it trash if you're young, or do you think you should buy your own home?
So it's both, right? I bought my first house. The great thing about your own house is that it's tax free. So when you make an uplift on it and you sell it, it's tax free. You're not going to pay capital gains like you would if it was an investment property. I sold, not last year, the year before, I sold my house, and at the time we couldn't find anything that was worth moving into, but we'd got like 10% above asking price, and it was just too good an offer to turn down. So we're renting at the moment. I don't see it as a bad thing. Puts us in a strong position. We got cash in the bank, earning interest. interest is very, very useful when you've got kids at private school as well. Definitely helps combat that VAT that they've just added. But when you look at it, the house that we're in, the house is about 950. If I were to buy that house, it'd probably cost me near on sort of 80, 90 grand just in purchasing costs. So that's 80, 90 grand you're not getting back. That's money lost, right? Your deposit's equity in your house, so that's safe. But your purchasing costs, your stamp duty, your legal fees, everything like that, that's dead money. You're not going to get that back. So how I look at it is, if I'm willing to lose 80, 90 grand to go and buy the same house that I could rent, well, how long could I live in that house off of the money that would be dead by paying rent, if that makes sense? So the house I'm in, we pay 3 grand. So it would take a long time for me to reach that £90,000 mark and say, actually, I'm worse off.
Yeah, I guess 3 years, roughly 3.5 years, in your sense, which is interesting.
The thing is, you've got to pay for someone to live anyway.
Well, this
like,
is
if
true.
you've got a mortgage or not.
Yeah.
You have to pay for someone to live.
And you've got the variable interest rate. Like in 2 years' time, what you budgeted for that was affordable today, what if we go to war and the interest rate goes to 10%, and all of a sudden your mortgage has gone from two grand to 4 grand a month? Like it's quite a tough place to be, because you might be in a position that no lender will lend to you because your affordability has changed. So there's so much to consider. But I wouldn't say I'm for or against. I think renting gives you flexibility, it gives you options. Like at the end of a tenancy, you can just say, we're going to move area. Your money isn't tied in. Whereas when you own a property, you've got to worry about trying to sell it, getting the best price. You've got a chain. It could take 6 months. Then you've got to find another house to buy. There's lots of pros and cons, but I see it from both angles.
I think it's as well, like if you live in a nice house and something, it doesn't matter what house you live in, if something breaks, you got to pay for it if you own it. So like my boiler went, my roof had to get that fixed, and then it got fixed, and then scaffolding was more than it cost for to get the roof fixed, and then that didn't even fix it, and then you just waste the money. Whereas if you got a landlord, like, you can kind of sort it, please.
If you think about it as well, right? If you've got like 200-300 grand in the bank, so you've taken the money out of your house, like realistically, how I would look at that is, what can I do with that money to pay for the property that I'm living in?
Yeah.
Like, can I make 10% a month that combats my whole year's rent or something like that?
Yeah.
So it's also about not just leaving the money in the bank and it's just sitting there, but can you use that? Can you put it into something that basically could pay for your lifestyle?
So do you hold property as well then?
No.
Don't.
No,
Do you strictly assisted sales and that's it?
Again, it boils down to this whole thing of like purchasing costs, and it also, I'm like a creator. I like building things. I like creating things. The thought of working hard to get 50, 60 grand and stick it in a property, and then what? You're going to make 500, 600 quid a month profit? It's not exciting for me. But if I can take that money and I can put it into a business and build a business that gives me 2, 3, 4, 5 grand a month, that's more exciting for me. The other thing for me, just I like property, but I don't love property. My biggest passion is business. So yeah, I prefer to invest it in there. But to make money in property, assisted sales all the way, and sourcing. Sourcing's like one of the best ways of making money in property with like zero risk.
Absolutely. So I've got a couple of questions around sourcing before we do. Final question on property ownership. Do you think it's advisable or worthwhile actually paying off your mortgage, or do you think it's kind of stupid to pay off your mortgage and you should use that money and invest it in other areas and just make money from the interest?
It's going to depend on the individual. Like if you don't have access to the knowledge of investing it and making it work for you, then 100% just pay your mortgage off. And for some people, that's like the goal. They call it like the American dream, isn't it?
Yeah.
But if you're in a position where you can earn a higher rate of interest by investing than what it's going to cost you to borrow the money and pay off your mortgage, well, it makes sense because you're going to be in profit every month. So me personally, I don't think it's worth paying your mortgage off. I think leverage it as much as you can. My father-in-law is a pretty successful man. He's in his 70s now. He's still got a mortgage. he could have paid it off a long time ago. But like most successful people, the way they grow is through leverage and borrowing, right? They build on other people's money. They don't risk their own money.
That's exactly what you taught me, Jake. So before I bought this place, I was going to do like a 25-year mortgage because I couldn't afford it. But he was like, it's stupid. Like, you put the money in a property or have it in the bank, it's still the same thing. So you might as well take that money and invest it in something to make a bit more dough. It's dead money in a house, effectively.
Yeah, depending on how you even when you're doing a repayment on your mortgage, like you're putting money back into the house.
Yeah.
So there's no point you putting the repayment in. Just if you can get interest only, get interest only.
But you pay like $1,000 a month, and it's likely to be like £200 coming off of your amount, and they front load it, don't they? So it's like £800 a month is the interest.
Yep.
So
so for my interest on my place, it's, mortgage is just under 1,700, and what goes into the property every month is 160 quid. Scandalous, isn't it? It's fucked up. It really is crazy.
Not even 10%, really.
Not at all. No.
It makes me think, like when I bought my first property and it was like 0.9% interest. It was like less, and I was like you. I was like, oh yeah, I'm gonna put it on like 32, 33 year mortgage. Like get the payments down as low as possible, and obviously hardly any of it was chipping away at the debt. If you were clever, you would have thought, you know what, now is the time to absolutely at 0.9%. Just pay as much as I can off.
Get equity.
And get as much equity. But we did well on our first house. Like we nearly doubled our money in 10 and a half years without doing work. That was a new build as well.
Oh, wow.
Nice.
Buying
you don't really make money on new builds anymore, do you?
No, we bought in phase one. And I think like they weren't sure if it was or wasn't going to be a good development. And then phase one went really quickly, and then all of a sudden our style house was 50 grand more in phase two.
Oh wow.
So
you could have sold off
50 straight away.
Yeah, we got in at the right time. And the thing is with like big developments, there was 5 phases, so it's like 500 properties. Phase one is always going to be the best phase because it sits at the front. It's the one that they use to sell the rest of the phases. And we realised, like, you walk around, we got better lamps, like lights, street lights out there. We've got nicer paving. We've got nicer flower beds. Like everything was nicer because that sells the rest of the development. So when it came to selling, it was like the more desirable part of the development as well.
That's what they're in Dubai at the minute, isn't selling a lot of stuff off plan.
Yeah.
So you don't know what's going to happen before. So then you buy it off plan, and then people will go on phase two. They can resell it on.
Yeah,
people make money that way. They don't even.
They do, yeah. It's
due to the end
like
of the
a
build.
form of property trading.
Yeah,
but off plan.
This is exactly that trading. Yeah,
like Liverpool and Manchester.
Yeah.
Oh my God, there's stories out there of how much, like especially Far Eastern investors have lost through them taking 50% deposits off plan to fund a development, and then all of a sudden the development goes wrong. And they lose all their money. Like
it's so risky.
It's scary. Yeah. Especially like when it's 3 years ahead. Like when it's a big skyscraper, talking like 3 to 5 years to build that. It's a long time for your money to be with someone and not actually have a product.
The assisted sale doesn't sound like it has too much downside. Have you? Because you're taking the risk as such. But have you ever lost money on an assisted sale?
I haven't lost money. There is risk, right? The risk is that you have to set a time period. So let's say I set 12 weeks to do the works and find a buyer. If I don't find a buyer and get them into legals in 12 weeks, I have to hand the property back. So there is a risk attached to it, but you can de-risk it. So for me, I'm only doing properties that, one, I know that either my investors will buy. So I effectively sell it kind of off plan. I sell it before I start doing the work, so it de-risks it. Or you do a property that you know estate agents have a massive waiting list for that isn't available on the market. So like I said, like 3-bed semis in the areas that I focus on, they tend to be the most demanded properties, but there aren't many of them available. So there's always a waiting list. So you know if you do it to a good standard, someone's going to buy it. I've had deals before where during the legals, the buyers dropped out. My contract's expired. So you're in a position where you're like, shit, I'm going to lose all my money. So you have to be clever. So in the background, you're looking for another buyer. You find another buyer, and you then have to let them know, look, the buyer's decided to buy it in a different name, so we need to change the name of the contract. But in reality, it's just a different buyer. But you got to do it, otherwise you stand to lose like 5, 6, 10 grand, whatever you've got in it. But it's also relationships, right? Like from sales, we all learn like people buy from people that they like. So for me, one of the most important things is not like I'm knowledgeable in property and I'm going to look after your property. It's I actually want to build a relationship up with the owners, make them feel comfortable, make them like me, and give them regular updates so that if something does go wrong and I'm out of contract, they'll be like, don't worry about it, Paul. Like, it's cool. If you need another 2 weeks, it's fine. So that's like my aim out of it. It's not really focused on the property. It's about protecting myself and building that rapport and relationship up.
It helps you as well as that if they like, I don't know, if they have friends that want to do the same thing in future, right?
Yeah. I get lots of referrals.
Yeah. So then property sourcing, because do you teach property sourcing?
Yeah.
You teach property sourcing. So can you talk to us about that? It's a good entry level, right?
So I do, I mean, I've done property sourcing for 8 years, and I do a free webinar every single week, and the first thing I talk about is who is it for. So when I started out 8 years ago, it was the entry level, right? It's you want to be in property, but you haven't got enough money, or you want to learn about property, you don't have the knowledge, so it's a good entry level for that. But with, like you said, about the taxes and the changing regulations, I'm finding there's more investors now that are saying, I've got 100 grand property, I net £200 a month, it's 2.5 grand a year. Why am I going to stick 30 grand into a property to make 2.5 grand when the person that found me the property is making 3 grand? Sell it to me.
Yeah.
So all with no money down either.
Yeah. Like there's no risk.
Yeah.
So I'm going to start trading on the properties that don't work for me. So I get lots of those. I also get tired landlords that are like, I'm too old, I don't want to buy anymore, but I still want to have a foot in property. So I've got lots of contacts, so I get deals. I'm looking to, I'll sell those on. So it's definitely changed from being like the entry level to full circle, like the whole, like the middle part of people that want to become like landlords and that aren't really interested in it. But I kind of feel like property sourcing is good for the start and the end of your property journey. But I also think there's nothing wrong, like with what I'm doing, being a professional property sourcer, like having that as a profession, because the risk for you is so low. Like your overheads, I would say my overheads are no more than £1,000 a month for that business. But one deal brings me in, well, for me, the way I source, one deal brings me in 10 grand. So one deal pays for my whole year, basically.
Is that your fees? 10?
Minimum 10.
How comes?
Because I'm just the best. No. So I do something called overage sourcing. So where most sourcers will, like you'll say to me, you're looking for a house, you've got 200 grand, it needs to have X, Y, and Z. I'll go out and I say, right, I want 2% or it's 5 grand for me to find that for you.
Yep.
And I get that paid up front. What I do is overage sourcing, which is, right, you say you're looking for a house for 200 grand, it's got a yield 7%, needs to be this, and this. So I go away and I'll find that house for 200 grand, but I will get it agreed for 180. What I'll do is I'll have a contract with the seller and say, right, would you accept 180 grand? They say yes. I say, right, I'm going to sell it to one of my buyers. My buyer is not looking on the market, so you don't have access to him. So my value is to bring you a buyer that's not readily available to you. But in return, I want any uplift that I sell it for above that 180 that we've agreed. So I get it off of you for 180, sell it to you for 200. I make a 20 grand margin on completion. So it's uncapped how much you can earn. Like we've done entire sites and we've made hundreds of thousands of pounds. I've done small flats and I've only made 2 grand. Sometimes it backfires on me because it downvalues. So sell it to you for 200, but it comes back and only values at 185. So then I've only got 5. But the key thing here is you're not selling it more than it's worth. It still has to value on the mortgage valuation.
Of course.
But there's less risk. And if anything, more investors work with you because you're de-risking it for them. So you might not want to work with me because you've been scammed by a sourcer before, so you don't want to pay upfront money. But then if I say to you, okay, well, if you work with me, you don't have to pay me any fee because I'm fully retained by the seller. So not only am I not charging you up front, but I'm also not charging you a fee as well. I get the fee from the seller.
Oh, wow. Okay, fine.
So it makes it a bit easier for you to source.
That's creative. All the stuff you're doing is like outside the box.
But then you need to be good at sales to
negotiation,
those deals, objection handle and stuff like that. And like you said before, the people see how much you're making and then they want a piece of it. You get that, right? Like all of a sudden it becomes a real thing. That conversation you had 3 months ago, we're now at the end and I'm sending you an invoice for 20 grand. And it's like, is there any way that I can get a little bit more? And it's like, no, it's too late in the day now. And sometimes if I feel like it's going to be a problem, I might just offer to pay legals or something like that. But typically, like the benchmark for us is 10 grand.
Decent. I think definitely being having experience in sales and being good at sales helps, because when we were getting our Airbnb service accommodation, was a case of like you have to speak to a lot of people before you get a yes, and you get so many no's. Like these guys, they were bashing the phones, and you just get like you get little leads, don't you? And then they don't come to fruition, and then suddenly you just come across a good one. But it takes resilience, right? Trying to do it.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it does. I mean, remember we had no problem getting the properties. We just couldn't manage them for shit, could we? We had like 6 properties and prostitutes were using the apartments. There was like parties.
Was the cleaning for everything though. It was like the cleaning just took the whole profit of everything.
Well, there was one winner from our business, boys. Our cleaner was making like 6 grand a month off us.
Yeah,
you know.
So stupid,
Well, it sounds like there was a lot to tidy up as well.
Mate.
Like Bonnie Blue staying there or something.
Oh mate, yeah, probably.
Yeah.
So with you do the training for property sourcing, and you do sales training. Is that the same tied in?
So I've had a sales training business for like 12 years. And I was actually, how I got into property is that I was employed to go into a property company and train their staff on sales and manage them. And then the more I learnt about what they were doing, the more I was like, this is what I want to be doing. Like, I always wanted to get into property, but I didn't want to be a developer. I didn't want to be a landlord. Didn't want to be an estate agent. So I kind of realised, okay, is there actually a role in property for me, or does this not yet exist? So, I started there, worked with them for a little while. That was in Bromley, and then went off on my own. Naturally, I did well, and people started to ask, how are you doing it? Can you train us? So I started up Sales Training Made Simple again, started training people, and then I started training people through a company called Property Training Made Simple. And then I was having massive success on social media in sourcing deals and finding investors. So I created Social Media Made Simple, and I was selling like 3 different courses, and it was a lot of work. It was like, it felt a bit disjointed.
Are these pre-packed courses? Where
No, so it was all live.
Oh wow! If you could do delivery, that's a lot.
I feel like I'm more interested in like people getting maximum value and actually having success. Like at some point, I will create a digital product that's out there, and you can just buy and you do it yourself, and it's irrelevant to me if you do well or not because I wasn't involved. But my main aim is I just want to help people. Like I missed that element. I did 8 years in property and I missed my sales training business, so I wanted to get back into it. But I was doing it for like 6 months, and I was like, I feel like people to be successful in property, they need all 3 of these. Like they need property knowledge to know what they're doing. They need sales for negotiation, objection handling, and they need social media so people know who they are, what they do, who they're looking to help. So I decided to create the Training Made Simple Academy, which basically brought them all in together. So now we do a 10-week training course that is all of it. So it's sales, it's objection handling, it's marketing, branding, social media, property strategy, finding investors. So it's like one course, that's all we sell. And that's just like the A to Z of everything you need.
How much is that course priced at?
$2,000. So it's cheap.
Reasonable.
It's cheap. $2,000 for 20 hours. And that's 20 hours live on Zoom with me as well. So 2 hours a week for 10 weeks. WhatsApp group as well. So we're in the WhatsApp.
Is it all just group calls, no one-to-ones?
So I do one-to-ones as well. So the $2,000 includes 5 hours of one-to-one. So we did just roll it out where it was the course, and the course was £1,400. But I feel like you do the course and then you go out there and you're just alone. And there's going to be loads of questions that you're going to come up against that weren't covered in the training. So we said, okay, it's now $2,000, but it's not now $2,000 because I've decided it's now $2,000. It's $2,000 because we're going to give you 5 1-hour calls with me up to 3 months after. And that's really been beneficial. Like, people have said that's been the game changer for them, because they've started going out and speaking to estate agents, and they're coming up with all these things that they've never dealt with before, never heard of before. And having me there to just set up an hour's call and just run through everything and give them the answers, or look at deals with them, see if they stack and stuff like that. It's been really good. But we also do just one-to-one mentorship as well. So we do 3 month or 4 months worth of mentorship, because some people already know what they're doing. They've already got the business set up, but they want to take it from here to here. So we work on mentoring them in all aspects of business, and obviously making, like, for a lot of them, they're doing sourcing. So getting them into overage sourcing. So lots of people think they need to do more business to make more money. But a lot of my mentees are doing the same amount of business, but we just restructured it so they're making 3 times more money without doing 3 times more work.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. I think the price point at 2K
excuse me,
for the course is good value for money, especially because you've got 5 1-to-1s there as well. It's quite difficult, I think, for consumers who want to get involved into property to know where to start. You've got various companies, without saying any names,
Gurus,
self-proclaimed gurus, some valid gurus,
isn't it?
Furus, quite a lot of furus as well. So what makes your course different from perhaps the spankers?
Yeah, I think because it's me, like, there isn't anyone else doing the training. So if I'm saying that you're going to do a course with me, it's only me offering that training. So that's one thing. Second thing is that the course is affordable because I run the business as lean as possible. So people have to charge $5,000 a course because they're spending 50 grand on Facebook ads. They've got massive offices. They've got loads of staff. They're doing these huge free, like, in-person events and stuff. All of that costs huge money. Like, I run big events. Big events cost me 40 grand. So if you're paying that out of your pocket as a free event, that money's got to come from somewhere. So I think what separates us, one is we run lean and we teach people how to run their businesses lean. That's like one of my biggest things. Secondly, I think the personal touch, like, I know it sounds cheesy, but I actually do care. I want my mentees to go on and do well. I limit it to only 10 people per intake, and I only ever have 2 intakes at a time, so they get my full attention. Same with one-to-one mentoring. I have no more than 20 one-to-one mentees at any time. So it's not like this, you're going to get lost. You're in a number. I have all of my mentees in a WhatsApp group. So we're creating a community for them to support each other. So I just like to think it's a service that I'm offering rather than it just being about it being like cash cow business. Yeah,
it makes a lot of sense.
And I think I bring property secondary to me, right? Sales, business, social media is primary. So I think what I bring that's different is I haven't come from being a landlord and a developer and decided to build a course. Come from being a trainer in sales. And as you guys know, in sales, like, we can sell any product. Doesn't matter what it is. We can sell it. It's only a small percentage of it. So I've got the knowledge in property. I've done a lot in 8 years. But I think my approach is very, very different. And when people come from other courses and then they come to my course, they learn 10 times more because they haven't heard it before on YouTube and stuff like that.
Yeah, to be fair, like, some of the stuff you said today, like the 2 main strategies you've used, like, I haven't heard of it, but it makes so much sense to actually do them.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
do you
not
think
everyone can do it though?
Yeah.
You've got to have that skill of being able to negotiate, being really good. Sorry. Being really good at, like, selling as well. That's going to be super, super important. And understanding who you're going to sell to. So if I want to get maximum money out of overage, I've got to sell for the maximum price. Most investors are selling at want to buy at discounted price. So it's all about then identifying who are these people and where can I find them. Because if you offer it to a property investor, they're just going to want it at the price that you've secured it for. So there's no profit. So there's so much involved. And I would typically say overage is like a little bit more of an advanced step. You need to have your database set up. You need to be experienced. You need to have good relationships first.
Is there a lot of people doing overage? Have you got competition?
No. I know a few people.
Had you just come across it?
So there's a term called back-to-back. I don't know if you've heard of back-to-back. So back to back was like the original way of doing it, whereby you're selling a property and I say, I'll buy that for 100 grand. But then in the background, I'm selling it to you for 120. And you two don't know this is happening. But when we get to the point of exchange, when we exchange contracts, I'm exchanging the contract with you, and then I'm exchanging a contract with you.
Wow.
But then you both find out that I've actually got it for 100. I'm actually selling it for 120, and you find out I'm actually getting it for 100, and then you're both pissed off because I'm making 20 grand for just sitting in the middle. So I don't really know how it came about, but at some point I was just like, there has to be another way of doing this that doesn't involve doing that. And the problem with doing it that way is that there's more risk for you, because I have two sets of legals. I've got a legal with you and I've got a legal with you. So that's like 2 grand. So if you both say, no, I'm not doing it because you're not making this money out of me, I've just lost 2 grand. You both cancelled the deal. I've lost 2 grand. Whereas this way, it's basically like a high commission estate agency contract.
Yeah.
That's the way it's done. So instead of saying on 200 grand, you're going to pay me 2%, I say on 180 grand, I'll make whatever's above. So it's just worded different.
So with your sales training business, where are you getting a lot of the leads from? Are you doing socials? Is it all organic
LinkedIn,
stuff?
right? You use a lot of LinkedIn.
LinkedIn's like the biggest one for me.
Really?
Everyone shot, like literally last night, I did a LinkedIn call. So I do this thing called the 28-day challenge, and it's for property professionals, not just investors, not just landlords and sources. But over the last 4 years, I've got over 30,000 followers on there, which is pretty big for that platform.
For LinkedIn? Yeah, that's massive.
But I've studied it, because if you've got 500 followers on Instagram, only 500 people typically see your post, unless you're doing what you guys are doing, which is creating tons of reels, putting reels out, and you might get 2 or 3 followers per one. It's a slow burner. I know you had Aaron on here the other day. He put a video out the other day and it blew up. But that's solidly posting for 4 years until he got his first viral video like last week. Like, it's crazy. But with LinkedIn, you got 500 followers. I've got 30,000. You got 10,000. You got 20,000. If you do a post that's really good and really engaging, and I like it, you comment, you repost, you then get exposed to all of our followers. So on the feed, it will say, Paul has commented on your post, and all of a sudden that's exposed to my audience. So the algorithm works really well, but it's about creating posts that attract the person that you're looking for, your ideal client, and making sure your call to actions to get them to like, to get them to comment, to get them to repost is like really solid.
Is it storytelling? A lot of storytelling on LinkedIn.
It's like mainly it's hooks and intrigue. Okay. Like when someone press see more, that's really good for the algorithm. Okay. So it's like you got 3 lines at the top of your LinkedIn post. First line is going to be your hook. Second line is going to be the intrigue. So it might be like, I don't know, like I made £1 million in property, and then the intrigue might be I did this by ... And in order for them to find out how you did that, they've got to click see more. So it's just encouraging them to interact. Maybe there's a free download, 10 steps to building a property empire. If you want this, just DM the word empire, and getting all those people writing empire will then obviously push it up for you.
Makes sense. So you have a business partner who was also on our podcast recently.
Yeah. I have a pain in the arse. Yeah.
I was going to ask, what's the dynamic there? Because you both seem quite good at like sales and winning business, and you both have a lot of knowledge when it comes to operation as well. So where do you guys kind of complement each other?
And what business is it? It's the
so we
business,
run
right?
peak performance events together, which is entrepreneur events in central London. And you know what? So we met on LinkedIn. Aaron was advertising for a podcast sponsor. I'd seen Aaron's podcast for a while. And it came at the right time for me, because I was looking for investors, and investors that I were looking for were typically like business owners. And I thought from Aaron's podcast, he had like Simon Squibb, Mark Wright, he had some big people on there. Thought, well, the kind of people that are tuning in to watch that are going to be business owners, they're going to be entrepreneurs. So I decided to sponsor him for a year. After like a couple of months of just recording podcasts together, we were like, we should do something a bit more than just this. So we said, let's set up an event. And what was great was that we both have complete opposite skill sets. So I'm the creative person. So I'm the guy that does all of the kind of design work. I'm the logistic person. So I'm the person that organizes the event. Aaron's the guy that's on social media, pushing the tickets. He's well networked. So he's speaking to the speakers, securing them. He's speaking to sponsors to raise sponsorship for the event. So we're in a position where we're not really treading on each other's toes. I think the only thing we cross over on is we're both selling tickets, maybe both raising sponsorship. But I'm happy to trust Aaron to go off, find the speakers, secure the terms. He's happy for me just to run the rest of it in the background as to like, let's get the ticket platform set up. Let me go and find the venue. Let me get the best price on the venue and work out the logistics of the night. I've had business partners before where we're both doing the same thing. And it was, well, I've had two business partners. They've both gone really, really badly, and I've lost loads of money because I've just walked away. So for me to have gone into business with someone, it had to be the right person.
The more of you that subscribe, the better value we can offer and the bigger guests that we can bring on. Please, it's going to help us massively with our journey, and we're going to bring you along with us.